Hi, I'm Sherry. I'm a volunteer with Easter Seals and CTN. And I want to introduce to you David Lepofsky. He's the chair of the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, the AODA Alliance. He's also the chair of the Toronto District School Board's SEAC committee.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here with you, and I'm also delighted that this is being recorded for webcast. My name is David Lepofsky, if you've heard. I myself am blind and am also a lawyer, so we call that two disabilities. And I've been involved as a volunteer advocating on disability issues in our community for many years. And I want to focus your attention on what we can do together to advocate for a school system in Ontario that fully and effectively meets the needs of all students, including all students with disabilities. Now, to begin, I want to offer you a chance to get more information on this topic. So we have a list here, a pad, and we're going to pass it around. If you would like to receive email updates on the nonpartisan campaign for accessibility in Ontario, and indeed across Canada, print your email address. We won't pass your name on to anyone else. This is the email update list for the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act Alliance. More on who we are in a minute. We will not ask you for money, and if you send us some, we'll send it back. Because we are totally volunteer. If you also want to learn more about, if you're watching this on video and you want to receive our updates, send an email to an email address I'm about to give you and just write "sign me up" in the subject line. That's all you need to write. And the email address is AODA feedback with no dots, AODA feedback@gmail.com. Well, what's this all about? Well, we live in a province and a country, and indeed a world, full of barriers. These barriers impede people with disabilities of all ages, whether they're disabilities of physical disability or a sensory disability like mine, or a mental or an intellectual disability, or a mental health issue, or a learning or communication disability, whatever it may be. Our world was not designed as if we were full and equal participants. That means our public transit systems, our government services, our healthcare system, our stores and restaurants, our workplaces, and our schools. Well, the oddity is, all these barriers are illegal. In the case of governments, they violate the Charter of Rights because it guarantees equality to people with disabilities without discrimination because of a mental or physical disability. And in the case of both government and the private sector, they violate the Human Rights Code, which also forbids discrimination because of a disability. And both the Charter and Human Rights Codes also provide that equality means that we folks with disabilities, if we are blocked by an accessibility barrier, have a right to be accommodated, all the way up to the point of undue hardship to the organization. So the question isn't, can these barriers remain? No, they can't. The only question is how long organizations have to fix them. Now, this was great. Those of us who took part in the fight for those rights back in 1980, very excited when we won. But what we found out after 10 or 15 years is that society isn't changing quickly enough. And it's not changing quickly enough for two reasons. The first is that to enforce these rights, people with disabilities have to sue one barrier at a time, one organization at a time. I don't know if any of you have ever ridden the Toronto Transit Commission buses or subways, if you have, you'll know that they announce route stops on every stop. They don't do that because they wanted to. They did that because I had to sue them personally twice. Once to force them to announce subway stops to accommodate blind people and sighted people who can't find their way around. And once to, that was a joke, and once to accommodate, once to require them to do it on buses and streetcars. It's wrong that we have to fight these one at a time. In the education system, parents shouldn't have to fight accessibility barriers one student in one school in one class at a time. It's just too much of a hardship to impose on people. The other reason there's a problem with getting the Human Rights Code and the Charter to work for us is that they're just too vague. Great words like don't discriminate or provide equality or accommodate, they're great and they're important. But they don't tell a school board how to format their website so that a parent with dyslexia or vision loss can read it when they post information about how to get services for your kids. So, this led a bunch of us back in '94 to say we need something new. We need a new law that will get us a fully accessible society without us having to sue one barrier at a time, and that will let organizations know what the heck they have to do. And when I say barrier, we're not just talking about steps that impede people using a wheelchair. We're talking about all kinds of barriers that impede all kinds of people with disabilities. That digital barrier I just referred to on an inaccessible website or posting stuff in a PDF that our access technology can't read, those are accessibility barriers that face people with vision loss or dyslexia. Lots of other kinds of barriers impede people with autism spectrum disorder or intellectual disabilities or learning disabilities and so on. So we fought from '94 to 2005. I had the privilege of leading that fight. And we won a law that was passed in 2005 at Queen's Park called the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, or AODA. That law requires the provincial government to lead Ontario to become fully accessible to people with disabilities within 20 years after it was passed. It was passed in '05. The 20-year deadline is 2025. It's less than 9 years from now. And the way it requires the government to lead us there is not for the government to go out and fix every barrier themselves or pay for everyone else to fix their barriers. No, that's not what it says. It requires the government to create a series of detailed regulations called accessibility standards. And those standards are there to tell organizations what they have to do and when they have to do it by, to provide the detail that human rights codes and the Charter of Rights don't fill in. And the government also has an obligation to effectively enforce them. So how are we doing, and how does this affect education? And what can you do about it? I'm going to spend the rest of my time on those three questions. Well, how are we doing? Well, we've made some progress, there's no question. We are further ahead on accessibility than we would have been if we didn't win this law. The government has passed a series of access standards to deal with transportation barriers, education barriers, information and communication barriers, customer service barriers, barriers in the built environment in certain public spaces like parking spots outside or recreation trails and a few other areas. But we got two problems. The first problem is the government is not effectively enforcing this law. Their enforcement efforts are paltry and they've been dragged kicking and screaming to what little they're doing. And second, the standards they've passed to date aren't good enough or broad enough to ensure that we reach full accessibility in less than 9 years from now. As a result of this, an independent review that studied how this law is working, that the government itself appointed, reported over a year ago that we are not on schedule for full accessibility, and that the law, while helpful, the way the government of Ontario has implemented it, that law has not made a significant difference in the lives of people with disabilities. Now, the coalition I lead as a volunteer, the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act Alliance, that's the email list you just signed up for, we exist to do two things: to monitor how we're doing and tell it like it is, and that's what I'm doing, but also to make constructive recommendations on how to improve things. And sometimes the government listens to us, sometimes they listen to us after we go to the media and there's a lot of coverage focusing on why we've got a good point. And unfortunately, too often the government doesn't listen to us. And one important area where they haven't yet listened to us is in the area of education. So let me turn to that right now. Everything I've just said about our society and the barriers we face applies with full force in our education system, whether it's preschool programs or schools or colleges or universities. Just like everything else in our society, they were designed on the false and unfair notion that we folks with disabilities aren't there. But in a sense, it's as bad or worse when it comes to our school system. Because our schools, our entire education system is built on an unfair starting point. The starting point is that there are two categories of students. One category are, well, they used to be called normal students, and the other category are the exceptions. And our school buildings, and by the way, they used to use the word normal. Now, our school buildings historically were built, our teachers were trained, our curriculums were designed, our playground equipment was bought, our gym equipment was bought, all on the unfair notion that the people who will use them are normal students. And normal students can walk with both legs, see with their eyes, hear with their ears, have no autism spectrum disorder or intellectual disability, or the many other things which are called exceptionalities. Now, can you imagine, and by the way, what that means is, in 1980, the government recognized that, well, we've got to educate everybody, but what we provide for those other students, the non-normal students, is called special education because they have special needs. Now, let's translate this into the workplace. Can you imagine a workplace that said there are two kinds of employees? There are normal employees, and then there are the ones who need the women's washroom. Or there are normal employees, and there are non-Caucasian employees. Both of those would be considered sexist, racist, and entirely offensive. Well, as a person with a disability, I find the idea of a school system that starts from the wrong premise to be deeply wrong-headed. What we need is a school system which is designed from the starting point that all students are to be included, that all teachers, all buildings, all equipment, all computer programs, all curriculum are designed so that we can all participate equally on a footing of equality. That would be a more sensible AODA-based way to run things. Well, that's not to say we're not doing anything right in Ontario. We've got good teachers trying to do good things, and we've got people trying to figure out ways to deliver to our kids. But they're working under a special education regulation that was, and law that really has its roots, that was designed, for the most part, a third of a century ago, and it's really showing its age. We like to think we're ahead of the US on a lot of things like healthcare and so on, but we're actually way behind the US in the entire notion of providing proper education and proper educational rights to kids with disabilities. So what do we do about it? Well, actually, before I get to what do we do about it, I'm going to highlight a couple of the problems that we've got. One is, of course, what I've just said, designing a whole school system on the wrong basis, and that leads in April of 2016 for the Toronto District School Board to have 550 schools, only 85 of which are physically accessible according to whatever standard the TDSB itself uses. I mean, that's crazy in the year 2016. It's just plain crazy. But on top of that, we have a system of protections for parents and families in the school board system that really leaves it very much up to the school boards to deliver as much or as little as they wish, and to put the burden on families to have to advocate and press if it isn't enough. But that's because they're trying to get exceptions to fit into a system that wasn't designed for exceptions. So it's got a problem in the way it overall works. And that's not to say people aren't trying to do good, and that's not to say we don't have success stories around the province, but we need a system that is better designed for us and our kids. So what do? What we need is to take a whole look at this whole system and to redesign it so that it is a modern system for educating kids with all abilities, not one that's based on the premise of the so-called normal students, though they don't use that word, and then those with exceptionalities. And if we are going to have a list of disabilities that we need to address and accommodate, we always will to some extent, because there's always going to need to be some degree of individual adjustment, it should be an inclusive list, not one that, for example, as we heard this morning, doesn't even include mental health conditions as a distinctive condition recognized as requiring accommodation. We shouldn't have to fight to get the obvious listed as the obvious. So, what do we do about it? Well, the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, I'm proud to say, really has the solution built in it. What we need is for the Government of Ontario now to say that it's time to develop an education accessibility standard that will detail what needs to be done and when it needs to be done by. And what that standard could do is really two things. The first is that it could identify the recurring barriers we have in school after school, community after community, and explain what's got to be done and by when, so that each school board doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. It could specify, if you're going to build a new school or build a new wing on an old school, here are the standards for accessibility. Here's what you need to make sure you include. And it's got to go further than the building code, because the building code is not sufficient. It could provide for requirements of digital accessibility to ensure that school boards ensure that when they have teaching equipment in the classroom, kids of all abilities, to the extent possible, can use it. Now, there's certain ingredients of this, little pieces of this in other standards passed under the Disabilities Act, but I can tell you they're not good enough, and they're not working to be good enough right now. So we know we need it. It could provide standards for what kind of gym equipment or playground equipment, so that each principal in each school or each school board doesn't have to go out and reinvent that wheel. It could set standards for teacher training, so that every teacher who eventually walks into a classroom doesn't have the word special before the word educated, in order to be assured that they can actually teach in an inclusive classroom. We heard this morning that the province is promoting inclusion. Well, that's great, but taking a kid with a disability and putting them in a class with a teacher who's never been trained to teach a child with that disability is not a formula for success. Not only that, but I do know that Ontario standards, I happen to be blind, I've learned a lot about blindness-related stuff, our standards for training the special itinerants who go in to assist students with vision loss in Ontario are lower than those in British Columbia or the Maritimes. What are we, an education have-not province? It doesn't make any sense. So that's one thing the standard could do. But the other, and that's exactly what AODA standards are there for, so you don't have to go one organization at a time. After I won my case against the TTC, the government, to its credit, passed a transportation accessibility standard. And one of the things it does is it sets the standards for announcing route stops so that people don't have to sue every public transit authority who were, I might add, dragged kicking and screaming to this accommodation the way I had to. Well, why should parents have to go through this? There was a great article in the Toronto Star a couple years ago about parents of kids on the autism spectrum who have a service dog who helps the kids self-regulate. And the kids in some cases want to take the dog to school. Some school boards say yes, some say no, some say, yeah, you can bring it, but only if the dog poops, mom or dad have to leave work right away and come and clean it up. I'm left wondering what they require if the kid happens to also throw up. Do the parents have to leave and do that too? But in any event, an accessibility standard could take the measures that have been proven to work and adopt them. Now, who develops this? Does it just come out of the sky or out of Queen's Park? No, under the Act. And I'm proud that the government for designing a good design for this and working with us closely on developing it. But it's done the recommendations are developed by consulting with the public, and they're recommendations designed by the experts in the needs of people with disabilities at the table, those with disabilities, and the experts with those who have to deliver, the educators. They make recommendations, they're made public, the government consults and then decides what it would enact. Now, you might think that we're going to run into some resistance on this. And who should be the first in line, hypothetically, to say, please don't dump anything more on us? It would be the frontline educators, the teachers. Well, guess who has written the government of Ontario over 2 years ago in some cases to support the call for an education accessibility standard? The Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario, the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation, the Ontario English Catholic Teachers Association, and the Ontario Confederation of University Faculty Associations. So what we can say happily is that those who speak for those in the front lines of our education system agree with us that we need this. They're not saying, oh no, don't make us do any more. They're saying, we need this. And by the way, last time I checked the newspapers, it's not like they're shy about being critical of government, some of those organizations, once in a while. So if they're prepared to be supportive, this is a really good sign. Well, what's the government of Ontario done? We have been pressing for an education accessibility standard for over 5 years. In the 2014 election, Premier Wynne wrote my coalition to me as its chair, setting out her accessibility commitments. And in it, she said the government's next accessibility standard would address healthcare and/or education. A year later, after that independent review I told you about reported that we are way behind on accessibility and reaching full accessibility by 2025, on February 13th of last year, the government, to its credit, announced that it would develop a healthcare accessibility standard, but it has said nothing about education. We need the government to develop and create an education accessibility standard. So what would that mean for you? Once we develop it, it means that you wouldn't have to fight for these barriers one at a time across the province, and it could, if designed properly, also include a more modern and fair and effective system for parents and families to be able to raise the needs for accommodation or accessibility or educational supports individual by individual. So one part of it, I should have said this earlier, one part of the standard could be setting specific province-wide standards on education accessibility, and the other is to create not an early 1980s system, but a mid-20-teens system for people to be able to ask for assessment of their child's needs and to raise and to advocate, and if there is an agreement, to be able to get a proper, prompt adjudication. Right now, the only thing you can take on appeal, as you heard this morning, is a decision over your child's placement not over the programs, not over the services, not over the contents of the individual education plan. If you're not happy with those, your only recourse is to go get a lawyer, go to the Human Rights Tribunal, watch the school board hire a lawyer at taxpayer expense, and then go through months or years of conflict, which no family wants to do. So we want a more effective, modern, fair, expeditious system to resolve these kinds of issues. So what do you do about it? Well, I'm going to offer you a couple of things, and then I'd love to open it up to questions. There's a few things you can do. First, sign up for our updates. You're going to learn from us action tips on how to help our campaign. That's the list that's going around in the room. Or if you're watching this as a web recording, email aodafeedback@gmail.com and sign us up. By the way, if you sign up with us, you get an extra little bonus for the money you don't pay. And that is, we are also the provincial affiliate of a national organization which I co-chair called Barrier Free Canada. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in the last election promised a Canadians with Disabilities Act. We're advocating on that. And we're quite excited about that. And you'll learn more about that too. The second thing you can do, and this is hugely important, if any of you are on Twitter, I realize that we think that Twitter is only for people under the age of 30, but I'm proudly over the age of 30 and absolutely hooked on Twitter. Follow us on Twitter. I'll give you either of two Twitter feeds. Follow us, retweet our tweets. I am at David Lepofsky, DavidLepofsky, and my coalition is at AODA Alliance, all one word. Because we raise a lot of these issues there, and you'll see us being active and giving you action tips and so on. The third thing you can do, and this is hugely important, if every single one of you, I don't care what political party, we are totally nonpartisan, your political affiliation is totally your business, we're not asking, we don't want to know. But if every single one of you were to write a letter to the Premier, write a letter to the Minister of Education, and call your own member of the Ontario Legislature, whatever be their party, all you got to say is one thing. I want you to create an education accessibility standard to ensure that our education system becomes fully accessible to all kids of all abilities. We need you to put pressure on members of the legislature, Liberal, Conservative, New Democrat, one at a time. If they're in the government, they can pressure the Premier. If they're in the opposition, they can raise it in the legislature. But one way or other, we need your voices heard. Much of what you've heard at today's excellent conference is how to go to your local school or school board to deal with immediate issues, and those for you are going to be hugely important. But I'm telling you that the brief moment it takes you to write that letter or to pick up the phone and call your member of the legislature or corner them if they're at some public event and raise this with them, would really help us. Now, I'm going to give you one other thing. And by the way, if you want to learn more about this, if you're on a computer, go to YouTube, do one little search on David Lepofsky, Lepofsky, and Steve Paikin, Paikin. Because just about a month and a half ago, just about a month ago from when we're having this meeting today, I had the privilege of appearing on the agenda with Steve Paikin, Ontario's foremost public affairs provincial program, talking about special education. And I talked about these issues. And that show is a useful thing to use to educate your member of the legislature. If you call them up, you get their constituent assistant, send them a link to that program. They're going to say, what do you want to talk to the member of the legislature about? Say, I get it. It's all in this one interview. Here's the link. It's coming your way. Use our resources to make things easier for you. The final thing you can do to help. Okay, now, this may be something that you're prepared to do, or you might say, oh my God, I'm not into this social media stuff, at which point you've got kids, you got nieces and nephews. This is totally fun. We've come up with a new way to raise our voices on accessibility. It's a campaign we call Picture Our Barriers. Now you got to remember it's a blind person telling you about doing pictures. So if I can do it, you can do it. What we want you to do, all you need is a smartphone. We want you to take pictures or videos of any barrier you see. They could be physical barriers. They could be bureaucratic barriers. And then we want you to go on Twitter or Facebook, but we prefer Twitter, or Instagram. I don't even know what Instagram is, so whatever. And we want you to tweet the barrier, the picture, with a brief description of it. And in Twitter, so you might go, listen, I just started Twitter. I got 2 followers, me and my spouse. Like, who's going to read this? The way you make it visible to everybody is by a search term that others are looking for. The term in Twitter land is called a hashtag. You've heard the term? It's the number sign. So if we invent a name for this campaign that you can put in your tweet and you use it, we'll all find it. We've got the hashtag. It's number sign, one word, AODA Fail.
Nice.
So if you go right now, instead of listening to me, and search on AODA Fail, you're going to see a whole bunch of them. So let me tell you one that's fantastic. I teach now at my old law school, at Osgoode Hall Law School. And I mentioned to our dean, who happens to be a good friend, that they've got an information technology help desk for students and faculty. Isn't that great? You just walk up on the main drag inside the main walkway or whatever it is inside the law school. Go right up the counter and you give them your computer and say, this doesn't work, and they'll help you. And just in case you don't know what it is, there's a sign that says Information Technology Help Desk. And for those who are blind, they've got it in Braille. Isn't that great?
Where's the Braille?
The sign is 8 feet off the ground. My dean tweeted a picture of it describing it, so I just retweeted it with a note saying AODA fail. Nice. I guess this is the meaning of the long arm of the law. Somebody else tweeted me, just bring your stilts. But people are doing this, okay? And then you might think to yourself, and this is what's great about it, you're going out for dinner. There's a restaurant with one step. You got a child with a mobility, take a picture. Tweet it and put in AODA fail and a couple of words to describe it. Step at front door of Lepofsky's restaurant. Now, here's the thing. And you want to know how to do this? If you want all the tips, I'm going to give you a link. We've got an action kit. We've got a one-page summary. It's all there. Go to www.aodaalliance.org/2016. aodaalliance.org/2016. You're going to find everything you need, including one other thing you can do, which is, in a sense, the knockout punch. Because just doing these tweets is helpful. But what really helps is if you tweet these pictures and these barriers to a member of the legislature, to the premier, or to journalists. So you could go at Kathleen_Wynne, steps in front of restaurant, AODA fail, and then picture. Okay? But here's what's great. You don't have to go take all the pictures. Because if you go to AODA fail, the search term, hashtag AODA fail, you're all going to go home and go on Twitter. If anything, this is a seminar on why you should do Twitter. Okay? But if you go there right now, you can just retweet every single barrier there to @Kathleen_Wynne, and she's going to get an... We're doing it. And if you do it, I'll retweet yours. This is what's going on.
Do you think she looks at her own Twitter feed?
They track them. Can I tell you how much they track them? I'm going to tell you how much they track. And by the way, you're going to say, I don't know the Twitter names of all these people. Go to that website, aodaalliance.org/2016. We've got every MPP up there.
Nice.
And their Twitter handles. All your work is done for you, and their email addresses. You want to write them and just say, I want an education accessibility standard? You don't have to look up their email addresses. We've done that for you. So I want to give you the big example. Last fall, there was a federal election, remember? Before that federal election, Barrier Free Canada wrote the major political parties to ask for commitments for a Canadians with Disabilities Act. The Green Party said yes, didn't hear back from anybody else, so we had to keep blitzing during the campaign. We couldn't get media coverage, almost none. during that federal election campaign. And you can understand the campaign ran twice as long as they normally do, so why would they have airtime? And didn't add any new issues, right? Well, we fought our entire campaign on Twitter. Really, we fought our entire campaign on Twitter. And we got some some candidates tweeting us back and calling us and so on. During the campaign, the NDP promised the Disabilities Act, and then did the Liberals. And now the federal government, to their credit, are working on it. So I'm telling you that these efforts make a difference. I mean, I genuinely believe that Premier Wynne is not the kind of person who would be against promoting more accessibility in education. She needs the pressure from you. And that is what will make a difference. Now, before I open it up to questions, I want to just tell you two other things. One is, if you in your community are involved in an organization or a group that might be interested in doing more advocacy on this issue, I want you to get in touch with me, because we would be delighted, either over Skype or in person, to take part in an accessibility forum that you might want to organize. We've done it at 4 different universities, and this upcoming Tuesday from 7 to 9 in Mississauga, there's going to be an accessibility public forum. In fact, you're more than welcome to come to it. The details are on our website at aodaalliance.org. Go to the What's New page, and you'll see right near the top the announcement of our accessibility forum on the 12th of April. And speak to me afterwards if you need more information about that. But if you'd like to, I don't care if you have 10 people, 20 people, whatever, we can work out a way to talk to you about how to get active on this. And it can be really helpful. Organize an accessibility scavenger hunt at your school. Suggest that this would be a great way for kids to learn about it. You're not criticizing any individual. The building is the building, the program is the program, the school is the school, the community is the community. It's what's there. And get them tweeting it and posting the pictures using hashtag AODA Fail. Kids love this. They absolutely love this. It's a really great activity. Barrier scavenger hunts are a great way to help out. And finally, if you are in the Toronto area or are part of the TDSB, next Saturday the 16th, TDSB, through the Special Education Advisory Committee, the Parent Involvement Advisory Committee, and other organizations, is holding a major event called Parents as Partners, with more sessions, kind of like what you're doing here today. Go on the internet to parentsaspartners.ca for signing up. I strongly encourage you to come. I said finally? I lied. I got one more finally. We actually have available, if we haven't given you enough information, I got a place you could go where you can quickly get more. On the homepage of aodaalliance.org, there's a link to a 12-part lecture series I did at my old law school 2 years ago, but you don't have to be a lawyer to watch it. It's aimed at everybody. You can, if you're interested in it, it's fully captioned. It'll give you the history of our fight for accessibility, our strategies, and what's new. So there's lots of added resources available, and you can click and watch, grab your popcorn. It's a cure to insomnia. And if you need more, you can get more. Or if you're not interested, turn it off, go watch something more entertaining. But let me conclude, and then I'd love to take your questions. I want to conclude by saying this. We are in a position to make a huge difference. But it requires us to take a little time out of the ongoing battle just to worry about what's going to be done for my child in school tomorrow, which is the most important battle for you, to also think down the road. And down the road, I think if the voices of parents of kids with different disabilities are raised collectively to call for an education accessibility standard, the government can't say no. I am used to, and our community is used to, uphill battles. When we started campaigning for the Disabilities Act in '94, it looked utterly hopeless, but we won it. When we launched and tried to get commitments on the Canadians with Disabilities Act, we couldn't get any space on the news. But using the alternative media, we got a commitment from our Prime Minister, and he's now appointed a minister to lead the development of the Canadians with Disabilities Act, Carlo Qualtrough, and he included $2 million in this budget for consultations to develop it. So these uphill battles can be won, and we're ready to win them, but we need your help. So thank you very much for coming, and I'm really delighted to take your questions.